Hello, SpongicX here with more custom stage footage from Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Finally got done showing off gameplay of Team Sonic Racing, so I thought I'd go back to continuing messing around with playing other people's custom stages in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. So here we have a stage inspired by The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. Apparently that game is getting a 3DS remake. I still have... Oh, never mind. A Switch remake, actually. But I'm sorry, but I never really liked the retro Zelda games very much. I'm more into the formula that was introduced with Ocarina of Time. I mean, I can believe that, you know, they were fun for their time, but, you know, I've only played, like, Zelda 1 and Zelda 2, never really had a desire to play any of the others. I did have Link's Awakening on my 3DS through the Virtual Console, along with the Oracle games, and I never got around to completing them. I just got bored of them eventually. I will admit, some of them had pretty neat ideas, though. Like, I especially liked Oracle of Seasons with the gimmick of how you can change the... Well, as the title says, you could actually change the seasons. And I thought, you know, it's like a novelty like that could have worked really well in like a 3D Zelda game. Like, imagine if Breath of the Wild allowed you to do that. Especially with how interactive the weather in that game was. But, I'm sorry, I just never really got into these retro Zelda games. I just never... There's never been any that made me want to go through and complete it like the other Zelda games have. Let me think. So, yeah, and I'm honestly not too big of a fan of the new art style they chose for Link's Awakening either. They decided to go with like a real chibi art style. I would have rather have loved to have seen them just try to reconstruct it more upscaled. I mean, yes, it can still have the top-down view, I suppose, so it still has like a nostalgic feel to it, but I just kind of wish they upscaled everything, kind of like the modern-day Pokemon games, where back then the characters had very chibi designs due to the limitations of the sprites, but ever since the 3DS era, they, you know, although it's still not quite as on model as, like, some might have hoped, it's still miles better than, the proportions in the old Game Boy and, the early DS games. So, yeah, I really do like how Pokemon has come a long way. And so with the Zelda game, you know, being the first, traditional Zelda on a home console since Link to the Past, it's kind of disappointing to see that they decided to go with a pretty simplistic looking art style. It almost looks like it was made in like a toy town. Everything looks so shiny and plastic. I don't know, I just really don't like that. That's not really the kind of style I wanted to see the first Zelda on Switch to look like. Let me correct that. The first new Zelda game on Switch. Because, well, technically it's not new, but... Okay, the one that wasn't also on another console, because a lot of people like to call Breath of the Wild a Switch game, but let's face it, it's mostly a Wii U game that was, at last minute, ported to Switch. Now here's a stage based off of one of the, like, bonus endings you could get off one of the Shantae games, where it just shows Shantae in a bikini with a thank you message. So, basically, fan service ending, I guess. Like, I believe one of the first games to ever do something like that was the very first Metroid game, because I remember hearing, like, if you beat the game fast enough, it allowed you to play as Samus without her helmet and power suit. So she's basically just running around in a bathing suit. You know, I'm honestly surprised that out of all the Metroid games that didn't do that, it wasn't Metroid Other M, the one that was made by Tecmo Koei, the people who made the Dead or Alive series, but... Speaking of which, here's a surprisingly naughty stage. When I saw the thumbnail of it, I wasn't expecting it to be so perverted, but then you go to the actual stage, it's like, oh god. But so there's a stage called Pauline, and my god, this is... I feel so dirty playing on this stage. The thumbnail of this stage just made it look like Donkey Kong's hand was like grabbing her and, you know, kidnapping her like he did in the original game, but I was not expecting what else this stage had to offer. Now, as Conker said in Conker's Bad Fur Day, now this is what I call a platform game. But it's so funny that they put a spring in between you-know-what. Now, like, some stages, when you see the thumbnail, they look very flat, and then it's like, you don't always know that the people have made this added layers of dimensions. So it's hard to tell, like, what's supposed to be a platform and what isn't until you actually load up the stage and it actually shows you the dimensions. Man, it's like it's just a shame though that it would have looked terrible likely, but imagine if the 3DS had a stage builder. It would have been kind of cool to see like what kind of 3D effects people could have made with these different layers, but yeah, then again it would have been a waste though, just like almost everything else on the 3DS, because there's just so many things on the 3DS I want to see happen. The problem is that because the graphics were so low, it made the 3D effects look terrible. Would have been cool if, before the Switch was ever made, imagine if we got, like, another console called, like, the H3DS or something like that, or the 3HDS. It would be, like, basically an HD 3DS. That would have been kind of cool, but, I'm glad we got the Switch, though, because, I've been tired of how so many games were being split across between the Wii U and 3DS. Games like Super Smash Bros., Sonic Lost World, Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games. It just felt like a really cheap tactic for Nintendo to try selling the same games twice. And, you know, they could have just made one superior version on one console, like making Super Smash Bros. 4 and a Wii U exclusive with all the features from the 3DS version jammed in it. But instead, they chose to, you know, sell the game, well, split the games and sell them separately. And so with Switch, you can't really have that excuse anymore, but of course Game Freak is still finding a way to do that with the Pokemon games, which I still think is ridiculous. But so anyways, this stage is Appa from Avatar: The Last Airbender. I unfortunately never really got into that show as a kid, but I really should, because you know, I hear so many good things about it, and I did see a few episodes of The Legend of Korra before Nickelodeon started taking it off the air abruptly, but I thought that was a pretty good show. I only saw, like, Season 1, though, and I saw a little bit of Season 2, and I know how it ends, and I know a lot of people are mixed about the ending. But, yeah, I really should give Avatar a chance, because, it's not that I thought it was a bad show, it's just that as a kid I never really was into anime or anime-inspired shows, where I know Avatar wasn't an anime, it was a Western series, but it was highly influenced by anime, especially like the works of Studio Ghibli and Miyazaki, and those are like some of the only forms of anime I'll watch. I love Studio Ghibli, like Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away, Castle in the Sky, Howl's Moving Castle. I mean, all those are pretty great films. And so, because, you know, since Avatar has more inspiration from that, it's like, it makes me want to give that series another chance. If I'm not mistaken, I heard Nickelodeon actually uploaded all the episodes for free online, so that's kind of convenient, but I'm just kind of busy binge-watching other shows at the time being, but I'll have to remember that sometime, try to binge-watch Avatar: The Last Airbender. Yeah, one thing I like about the black hole item they introduced in this is how when I first saw like the announcement of it, I felt for sure it was going to be like one of those automatic death kind of items, which I think are some of the worst kind of items in this game. So I was glad to see it was just a trap, if anything, but it wasn't an automatic kill. Now, it's like the Reaper Scythe. I think that's an interesting one, because it almost seems like it's an automatic kill one, but it only works when the the opponent's damage is like up past like 150%. And so, regardless, it's not really much of an automatic KO, because it's basically just a specialized effect of knocking an opponent out of the arena. Because let's face it, even if an opponent did have 150%, chances are being hit with another weapon would automatically knock them out. But with the Reaper Scythe, it's a more stylized version of it. So here we have a stage based off of a pixelated Piplup from Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, or the Sinnoh region. Piplup, that was always my favorite starter from Diamond and Pearl. I always loved his final evolve form and Polygon. I remember Piplup was a summonable Pokemon in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, but ever since Super Smash Bros. For Wii U, they replaced him with Oshawott for some reason. That's one thing that disappoints me about the Super Smash Bros. Games. It's like, I felt like in Melee, the variety of all the different Pokemon you could get were pretty good, and that was saying a lot because there was a lot less Pokemon back then. But nowadays, we got more Pokemon, and it seems like there's less variety than there used to be. It almost feels like every time you go into a match in Smash Bros., you're going to see the same Pokemon you saw in the previous matches. I remember, like, in the last one, it felt more mysterious over, like, which Pokemon you were going to get, whether it was, like, I thought there was a decent variety in not only the selection of Pokemon, but what they could do as a stage hazard. And in this, it just feels very limited, unfortunately. They got rid of a lot of Pokemon, replaced them with just a bunch of copies of, like, some of the Pokemon we've seen previously. And there's even some Pokemon that just haven't been substituted entirely. I remember in Super Smash Bros. 1, there were at least 2 Pokemon that were unique to that game, which were Beedrill and Onix. Now, Beedrill was a fun one, because it just, summoned a swarm of Beedrills to invade the screen. And it's like the closest thing you could say you got to that in this game would be Latios and Latias. Well, it has a similar function of, it's not really the same as a bunch of Pokemon swarming the screen. It's just 2 sibling Pokemon just dashing across the screen. And then Onix was like a Pokemon who caused like a giant rock slide, and you don't really have a substitute for that in this game, unfortunately. I remember also you had like Porygon 2 in Super Smash Bros. Melee. I remember at first he seemed like a useless Pokemon, kind of like Goldeen, which I still don't understand why they have Goldeen instead of Magikarp as the dud Pokemon. But anyways, Porygon 2 actually was an interesting one, because it's like if it spawned out right next to an opponent, its beak would like pierce like the other opponents and send them flying. So he wasn't as useless as he first appeared. You just had to have him summon right next to an opponent instead of away from an opponent. But I still feel like there should have been a lot of other Pokemon in these games as like summons. Like I hated how a lot of them who were in previous games just took the role as like spectators for some of the Pokemon themed stages. Like I remember in Super Smash Bros. 1 and Melee, Blastoise was a summon. Although in Super Smash Bros. 1, he wasn't really a summon, he was more of a stage hazard for the Saffron City stage. But then in Pokemon Stadium 2, I believe they had him as an actual Pokeball summon, where he'd use Hydro Pump, similarly to how like Charizard used to be an assist with the Pokeballs. But I just noticed that there's still a lot that are missing in this game. Like Venusaur used to be one in the originals, and he's gone now. Unless you count Saffron City, but still not as cool as like the Melee one. I remember how in Melee also they had all 3 of the legendary beasts, including Raikou, but for some reason Raikou has been absent ever since Brawl, but Entei and Suicune have still been making returns. Zapdos and Articuno are no longer there, but Moltres still is for some reason. I never understood that. I do like how they still have Lugia and Ho-Oh though. That's pretty nice, but well, no, actually, if I'm not mistaken, Ho-Oh was removed, but it's part of the the Pokemon League stage now, but Lugia is still a regular summon. But what about Rayquaza? You know, he went from a boss battle in Brawl, but he's no longer there, unfortunately, so that's kind of a shame. But yeah, I just feel like this game could have had a lot more Pokemon. Same with assist trophies, unfortunately, but I guess every game has their limitations. So here we have a stage based off of Pepsi Man. Now, I don't really know the origin of this, I just know, like, it became kind of like a laughable meme. If I'm not mistaken, Pepsi Man was like, a mascot from Japan's commercials for Pepsi, so that's probably why I'm not familiar with it outside of meme territory. I just thought the stage looked pretty creative, and so I thought I'd try it out. And I have no idea what Incineroar is doing, but it looks like he's stuck. That is one strange can of Pepsi. And I believe I am trapped. Yeah, one thing I wonder if I wonder if there's like one thing they're eventually gonna add into Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. I wonder if it would be this. So, you know, a lot of people like how the classic mode in this game has like where each character has like their own set path to completing the game, and so while that is really nice, though, part of me kind of wishes it was a little more randomized, kind of like the one in Brawl and Melee, because, I mean, the only reason I hated it being randomized in the one for Wii U is because of how unfair it was when, you know, the 8-player smashes popped up. It especially became brutal when you were trying to unlock all the achievements, and a lot of them required you to, like, beat them without losing a life on the hardest difficulty under a time limit, or, you know, all that, and so... But because most of the achievements in this game were a lot easier, and because I've already collected them all, I wouldn't mind them making a more randomized classic mode. But also, I'd wonder, how fun would it be to actually try attempting the other classic modes as another character? So it's like, for instance, you select Mario, but instead of going to the default Mario classic mode, what if you could have him go down the path that Sonic would take, or the path that Peach would take, you know? So see how they fare with, like, the other, you know, competitions and stuff like that. That'd be kind of an interesting challenge, trying to, I mean, that definitely add a whole lot of replay value, trying to beat the game, well, trying to beat every classic mode as a certain character, and then, I mean, because, heck, beating classic mode alone was pretty lengthy, but that's the problem, though. It's like, even if they did do that, there probably wouldn't be any kind of rewards for doing that, though, so it wouldn't really... So, unless, like, you're just so bored, you just want to fill up, like, a chart of achievements or something, that's, like, the only plus I can see from that. But part of me wishes there were more unlockables in this game, and that's one reason why I missed the trophies. I thought the trophies felt more earned, and spirits, I thought they were way too easy to get, and it's like, they just aren't as fun to collect. You know, eventually I leveled them all up, and it's like, okay, now what? It's like, yeah, it's kind of cool that you could level them up and then transform them, but at what cost? They're so useless. Now, it's like, one reason why I love playing the Pokemon RPGs is because of how fun it actually is to level up your Pokemon. It's fun to see them start off as really small and then see them get more powerful in battles to the point where they might be strong enough to, you know, handle a competition or online battles and stuff like that. But with spirits, you don't really get that. And I still, I'd still like applaud if Sakurai revealed that they were just placeholders for like, imagine how cool it would be if we eventually got an update that allowed us to take our max level spirits and evolve them in actual 3D model trophies. I mean, that would definitely be really fun, just being able to, especially since I've already max leveled all of the spirits in the game, and so it's like, it's like I've already done my part on collecting them all and leveling them all up, and so being able to just transform them into trophies with descriptions, and that would be really fun. And I'd also love to see the return of the photo studio mode, where you could place the trophies across like the backgrounds and take screenshots of them. That's still one thing that the Wii U version has over the Switch version, along with being able to draw on the screen when taking screenshots. Those were really fun features, and even if they did somehow bring them over into the Switch, it wouldn't be the same. It would just be as underwhelming as drawing the stages on the Switch version, because while the stage builder is a lot better than the Wii U version, the Wii U version was still a lot more convenient to use, because the touchscreen wasn't a multi-touch screen. It was one that just worked specifically with the plastic styluses. And unfortunately, you can't use styluses for Switch unless they're like a plastic nub kind of one. And so, unfortunately, multi-touch styluses do not work as well as like plastic ones you would get for like Nintendo 3DS or the Wii U. So, yeah, drawing on the Switch is not very fun or convenient. Part of me just wishes that we'd get an update that allows Wii U owners to play Switch games on their Wii U gamepad in some form for some, like, additional functionality. That'd be kind of fun. Like, I can understand not every game would be able to work for it, and, but I'd kind of love to see, like, the two-screen gameplay again, and, it would be a good way of apologizing to all the Wii U owners that Nintendo screwed over. It's like, they could make, like, the Wii U gamepad a new accessory for some upcoming games, but then it's like, for those who already have the Wii U, it's like, okay, you're in luck. You can just use the gamepad, with this new update, and, so there will be certain Switch games that have features, like, Mario Kart, or Splatoon, where it'll work just like it did on the Wii U, but, where you'll play it on the TV, but then the controller is the Wii U gamepad with the second screen for the mapping and motion controls, and because the Switch's motion controls are just terrible. I cannot stand them. I miss the Wii and Wii U motion controls. They weren't perfect, but they were so much better. I have not seen a single Switch game that works properly with motion controls. They are all messed up. Another thing that'd be kind of cool is, eventually if we did get, like, the Wii U gamepad support for Switch, imagine, if Nintendo eventually made, like, 3DS Virtual Console for Switch, kind of like they did with the DS on the original, Wii U. They had it where you could use the gamepad as the touchscreen, but then use the TV screen as the top screen, or you could even switch the settings to where the gamepad was the entire both top and bottom screen of the 3DS. So, there are multiple ways to play it. The only thing I really liked about it is it finally gave you a chance to kind of see, like, what these games would have played like if they had more of, like, for instance, not everyone liked the controls of the 3DS, so playing Mario 64 DS was not very comfortable. So, I liked how this kind of allowed players to play it with a joystick, because the closest we had to playing it with a joystick was playing it on a 3DS, but, a lot of people don't really like the circle pads on the 3DS. There's a reason why people like the Joy-Cons a lot better, or Pro controllers, but, it finally allowed you to play Super Mario 64 DS on your TV legally without having to resort to pirating or emulators. And so although, the graphics didn't look too great on TV, I still thought it was really fun to finally be able to play that on TV like I always wanted. And I can imagine with the 3DS, although it wouldn't be perfect, 3DS games would definitely look much better on TV than a DS did. It just looks slightly lower than what you've seen on GameCube or Wii, but still better than what you've seen on, like, N64, for instance. I'm surprised E3 is almost here. I'm not giving up any big hopes this year, though, because E3 just hasn't been the same. A lot of the announcements they make just are so boring. I still have really fond memories of the first E3 I ever saw, and that was E3 2004, and I believe that was the E3 where Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess was finally revealed, and I just remember there was just so much energy with that reveal. I mean, not only did the trailer for The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess look amazing, but, I mean, you heard, like, the fans' reaction to it. They were just going nuts over it, and then people got more excited when Shigeru Miyamoto himself came out dressed up like Link. And, you know, you just don't see presentations like that at E3 anymore, and it's just really depressing. But it's not just the presentations that were amazing. I just thought the games and announcements as well were really good. I remember that was like one of the most hyped years of the GameCube I ever had. I mean, I was so excited to see like the footage of Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door, Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, the next Mario Party game, and not just Nintendo, but even like Microsoft. You know, I was really excited for Conquer Live and Reloaded, and that was like where they revealed one of the big trailers for that game, showing you how good the remake of Conker's Bad Fur Day will be, look appearance-wise, and so, yeah, like, E3 2004, that was one of the most memorable E3s of all time for me. I also liked the E3 where they revealed the Wii, but I still thought it was kind of underwhelming, though, because they just didn't reveal much, aside from Super Smash Bros. Brawl. And, another thing that disappointed me was just how disappointing the console's name was, because, keep in mind, back then, before the Wii was officially unveiled, when there were rumors of it, they were calling it the Nintendo Revolution. I loved that name so much. So, in the end, when the name was just Nintendo Wii, such a childish, questionable name, I just did not understand that. And I was a little turned off by how, you know, at the time there wasn't any confirmation on, like, a traditional controller. And although we did eventually get a more traditional controller on the Wii, the classic controller just still wasn't very comfortable, unfortunately. It still felt very limited compared to, like, a GameCube controller, but luckily we did eventually get a GameCube. Well, we did get GameCube compatibility for the Wii at first, until the later models came out and scrapped it entirely. And to this day, I still wish they would make, you know, a more modern-day version of the GameCube controller. Because, yes, I'm aware they still make GameCube controllers for Smash Bros., but do they make updated controllers, ones that can actually work with other modern-day games? Because there's quite a few buttons and functionalities that are missing for the GameCube controller. So it's like imagine if they took some inspiration from like how Sony's been treating their controllers, where almost all of them are like an improvement of the DualShock controller that went all the way back to the PlayStation 1 days. I mean, PlayStation keeps using the same model for their controllers, but with little additional functions added to it. For the most part, most of them were very simple. I mean, PS2 is practically the same as PS1's. PS3, the only big major difference there was you know, it had like the gyro controls for certain like tilt functionalities in certain games. And then PlayStation 4, that was the most drastic change that the PlayStation controller had. It still could do everything the previous controllers could do, but the big defining features here was not only the little touch panel in the center of the controller for certain like menu functions, and not only that, but it also worked as a button as well. But there was also now the ability to have the share button. And so that was quite, you know, intuitive at the time. But then again, Microsoft was doing that as well. Now practically every controller nowadays has like a share button. But before I continue, I just want to say, yeah, I thought this stage was pretty funny. Mr. Mime from Detective Pikachu, which was a really funny scene. Was it just me, or was there something about Mr. Mime's face in this where, did it remind anyone else of Maui from Moana? I don't know why. Something about the wrinkles on his eyebrows and his big smug look. He looked like Maui. But, so yeah, going back to the controller topic, so yeah, with GameCube, I want to see them make a modern-day improvement of that, because to this day, I still think GameCube is one of the best and comfiest controllers I've ever used, not to mention one of the most durable. So I've had many controllers over the years. You know, it's like my first console was an N64. I got that back around 1999, and the controllers have not aged well. They are broken nowadays. They have not aged well at all. GameCube controllers, you know, they're about 15 years old, and they still work perfectly fine. But then it's like, if you look at like some of the Wii remotes, some of the buttons and control pads on like the 3DS. Heck, I've already had to replace some of my Joy-Cons already on my Switch because the left one just gave out, so I had to buy a new one. I ended up saving money and I just bought a second one. I just bought one of those bundles where you get both a left and a right because it seems like a ripoff to buy just one Joy-Con instead of buying the bundle. Because buying a left or right Joy-Con separately is $60, but getting a bundle with both of them is $80. So yeah, even if you don't plan on getting the second one, it still doesn't hurt, because just in case something ever happened to my old, or even my new, right Joy-Con, at least I still have the old right one that still works fine. It's just that left one that doesn't work very well. But, so yeah, GameCube, they really need to bring back that controller from modern-day Switch consoles. You know, add extra shoulder buttons, buttons on the analog, share buttons, a menu button, you know, that would be really great. So I think that could go down in history as the best controller ever made. Because that's like the only shortcoming that a lot of people point out the GameCube for. So many people, you know, make like top 10 lists of the best Nintendo controllers, and it's like, I always see like they put GameCube on it and they say they would put this #1 on the list if it weren't for a few shortcomings, and you know, I absolutely agree, because GameCube controller has potential to be perfect, but unfortunately it just isn't, because it doesn't have everything to match modern day gaming. I mean, heck, the Switch allows you to play almost every Switch game with a GameCube controller. The problem is that you're not going to be able to complete them if a lot of them require you to use like a ZR button, a ZL button, or analog triggers. You're not going to be able to complete the game in that case unless you have those buttons. It's like how some people try playing, you know, Super Mario Odyssey with you know, a non-motion controller. You're not going to be able to beat the game entirely if you don't use a motion controller, because you have to vibrate or you know, swing, shake the controller in order to do certain functionalities in the game. Some that are actually required to progress through the game, and so if you don't have like a controller with a gyroscope in it, you're out of luck. So, speaking of Mario, here's a stage based off the slide stage from Super Mario 64. That was always fun, and, but dang, was that tricky for me to figure out as a kid, the one secret star. So, fun fact, can anyone recall, like, what was the last star in Super Mario 64 they were ever able to find, and can you recall, like, how hard it was? So keep in mind, before, like, when I first played through Mario 64, this was back before I had internet access. I had no idea what guidebooks were, so I had to beat the game entirely on my own, and it took me a few years to finally, you know, it's like I've already beaten the game like a year in advance, but it's like, the following 2 years, I was trying to figure out how to get the other stars. And I remember, like, heck, I didn't even know how to find Snowman Land. That was one of the hardest levels for me to find. I didn't find that level until after beating the last Bowser boss fight. But, you know, I also had trouble finding out where that Wiggler boss fight was, because I remember in the credits it showed the Wiggler crawling around, and I had no idea where that was, and so I looked everywhere till eventually I went to Tall Tall Mountain, and, you know, I just did a bunch of random things until eventually, you know, I drained out, like, that giant mountain, and, I noticed how it created a little hole, so then I went into the alternate version of the level where Mario shrinks. I went down the hole, and then all of a sudden, oh, there's the Wiggler. How was I supposed to know? But, the very last star in this game, you know, eventually when it came to a point where I realized there's only one star to go, where the heck is it? I was going everywhere, just punching every wall and ground pounding everything, and so eventually I just went to Peach's Slide, and I just, you know, I kept racing down that over and over for, I can't remember what reason, but then eventually when I went across the finish line after apparently, like, setting a new record, all of a sudden another star appeared, where normally you just get a star just for reaching the end, but apparently there's a star there that you get for beating it under a certain time limit, and so all of a sudden I'm like, all this time, the last star was here, and at the time I didn't understand how I unlocked it, but eventually when I got internet access, you know, I was able to comprehend, oh, you get it under, beating it under a time limit. Kind of unfair, though. The game doesn't really give you any hints to that. I mean, I don't mind games having secrets like that. Like, it's one thing, like, when, you beat the game and you talk to an NPC who all of a sudden appears, and they said, oh, do you remember the, a little hill from like the first world? Yeah, it's pretty fun, but didn't you know if you go down it fast enough something will happen? Or, you know, so stuff like that is pretty understandable. But in a game like Mario 64 or heck even Ocarina of Time, they were very brutal at not giving you very good hints on how to progress. And that's one thing I like about video games nowadays. They give you options. I mean, there are some games where, you know, they are very pesky with hints, and that can be very annoying for some, but for me, I'm thankful that video games have come that far, because I tell you, I kind of wish I had some of that help when I was a kid. That would have made my gaming experience a lot more fun, instead of wandering around and losing track of what I was supposed to do next, because the game failed to warn you at what to do. I mean, I never would have been able to complete Conker's Bad Fur Day without a guide on the internet, because, man, that game really did not do a good job at telling you what to do next. I mean, I thought starting off in the game it did an okay job, but then eventually it's like once you get to like, I'd say like once you get to like the Pooh Lodge or the Clock Tower, that's where the game just suddenly says screw helping you out. It just does not want to help you anymore. It just wants you to run around, do random things, and hope something happens, and that's not always fun. So here's a pretty fun stage. Is Mayonnaise an Instrument from Band Geeks and SpongeBob. This is one of those Ricochet Fest kind of stages. A lot of knockback. Yeah, one thing I forgot to mention in some of my previous Super Smash Bros. Videos is, you know, I still don't understand why is there so little when it comes to Final Fantasy music. I mean, some could make the excuse that, okay, Final Fantasy VII didn't have a lot of music to choose from, but then again, how does that excuse the Persona series then, where it, you know, the character they chose from that is exclusively from Persona 5, but that doesn't excuse how a lot of the other music were from previous Persona games, along with the spirits, in fact. And so, yeah, it makes you realize that, yeah, Final Fantasy VII is very limited. Well, Final Fantasy as a representative in this game is very limited. I mean, we don't even have any assist trophies. We don't have a whole lot of spirits either. And the music is definitely disappointing. I mean, it's bad enough we only have 2 tracks, but it's the original format from the PS1 game. I mean, no offense, but as classic of a game as Final Fantasy VII is, the music has not aged well. It would have been nice to see, like, remixes of it. Heck, even, you know, that would have been some good promotion for the upcoming remake. Actually have sneak peek, early releases or shortened versions of some of the upcoming music for that game. That would have been kind of cool to feature in Smash Brothers. But what also really bugged me is, okay, they didn't have enough tracks to choose from for Final Fantasy VII. Fair enough. Now, what's their excuse for why they didn't pick other songs from other Final Fantasy games? I mean, Final Fantasy X, Final Fantasy 13, Final Fantasy 15, those had some pretty good music tracks. You know, I would have loved to have heard the battle theme from Final Fantasy 13 used as a stage song for Midgar. That would have been nice. And or the music that plays when you finally reach Xanarkand in Final Fantasy X, that would have been really nice and atmospheric for certain stages. So, yeah, that's very disappointing how cheap and lazy Square Enix was with that. It's hard to say who's at fault. Is it Nintendo or Square? But if you ask me, I'm guessing it's Square. So here we have one of the gym leaders from Pokemon Black and White. I want to say her name was Elsie, I think was her name. She is the electric trainer who was one of the hardest boss fights in that whole game. God, her Emolgas were so annoying to fight, but I also heard, like, I never really I stopped watching the show after the Game Boy Advance saga, but I heard a lot of people said for the Black and White saga, she is one of the worst gym battles Ash ever had to fight against, and it's such a shame too, because I know a lot of people like Elsie as a gym leader, like they like her design, or they like her character, but I just remember a lot of people saying that gym battle was the worst in the series, and boy, it's like, well, I'm glad I don't watch the show anymore, because I don't have to be disappointed by it then, but I'll take people's word for it, because from what I've heard, Black and White was one of the worst in the Pokemon anime. It was there where the series just kind of started acting like, screw continuity, but then all of a sudden it started acting like it did care about continuity, only to ignore it once again, and so it was a very mixed up season. I hear like there was one part of the anime that actually was really good. I heard X and Y was pretty good. I unfortunately never got into that. It's like the last Pokemon season I actually watched some of was Diamond and Pearl, and I was at the point where I grew out of the show, but from what I've seen, it's like, okay, it looks like a step up from where the Game Boy Advance saga was going. I mean, I just remember noticing the Game Boy Advance saga was really going downhill, especially when the 4Kids, lost the rights to the series and handed it over to a new dubbing company. But I just remember thinking it was really dumb overall. I hated Max. He was the worst character. But I remember, like, Diamond and Pearl, I thought it was okay. Just, it's like I outgrew the show. I just only liked the games at that time. And I've even tried giving the show a few chances here and there, and I always just remember why I stopped watching it in the first place every time I tried. So, I tried watching Pokemon I Choose You when they aired it on Disney XD, and I thought that was a terrible movie. It was just such a terrible reboot. It felt so rushed, and I mean, the only good thing I can say about it was, okay, the art style was nice. It was definitely an improvement over the original Pokemon episodes, but the story and characters were just so underwhelming. I mean, remember like how in episode 2 of Pokemon when they introduced Team Rocket and they introduced them as like an actual threat? Although over time they got more sillier. It's like, during episode 2 though, it's like they presented these characters, these were going to be the main villains of the series. We were going to see more of them as the series progressed, and I thought the series did a good job at establishing who these characters are, what their goal is. And so with this reboot of Pokemon I Choose You, the one where they actually bothered skimming through a bunch of episodes just to tell a story, it made you wonder, okay, why was Team Rocket in this movie when they did absolutely nothing? They were just there to look like, oh, they're going to cause some trouble, only to get foiled. They never even ran into Ash once. They didn't even have a reason to want to take Pikachu in the first place, like episode 2 actually presented. I mean, in episode 2 of Pokemon, Team Rocket had no interest in Pikachu whatsoever. They thought he was such a useless Pokemon until Pikachu caused like a really big burst of electricity that defeated them. That's where they all of a sudden were convinced this Pikachu is special. Their boss would be impressed with it. So that set up the whole reason why they constantly, stalk Ash and try to capture his Pikachu throughout the series. So with this Pokemon reboot, they did a terrible job at establishing who these characters are and what their purpose is. And that's a problem with a lot of reboots. A lot of reboots expect that because you've seen the original, that means that, okay, we don't really need to explain it then. But that's the thing. Then a lot of companies try making excuses. Okay, we made this for the younger audiences. Try to introduce them to what the older audiences were introduced to, because some are convinced that older episodes don't hold up nowadays. And so, with that excuse then, how are kids supposed to understand this if they're not going to explain who the characters are, like the originals did? And, that's one reason why I was really impressed with Pokemon Detective Pikachu. I went into it as both a Pokemon fan and trying to think in perspective as a moviegoer. Okay, imagine if I was a guy who never saw Pokemon. Would I be able to understand this movie? So, I was able to enjoy the movie from both perspectives. I liked it as a Pokemon fan, and I liked it as a moviegoer. I thought the movie, although the movie definitely is better if you're a Pokemon fan, I thought, I saw it as a movie where, okay, possibly anyone can enjoy that if they gave it a chance. And the movie did a fine job at explaining what Pokemon are, heck, even better than the show itself, I would say. But, yeah. I just really do not like what's become the show, and so I even tried watching a few episodes of Pokemon Sun and Moon, and I honestly thought that was like one of the worst in the series. I thought the voice acting got so terrible at this point. There's just no emotion inside the characters. They're just all talking so slow and dumbed down. It's like the audience is too afraid for the. Well, I mean, it's like they're afraid that the audience won't understand it. The characters try talking more seriously, more maturely, and that's just another reason I really hate the show. I hate how it refuses to grow up. I mean, I would love to see Ash go through some actual development instead of constantly being a 10-year-old, despite how there's so many episodes that establish that, years have passed. And so it's one thing to do that in shows like The Simpsons, where it's already nonsensical. It's supposed to be a comedy, and they realize that if they age the characters, there's a lot they won't be able to do with them anymore. So those shows, they take that to their advantage. But Pokemon was always presented as like a saga, where it always sets up that there's going to be an end to the story. And the problem is that so many of them are repetitive. They always end with Ash losing, and some of us are sick of that. We want to see him finally win, and then possibly see the series move on to another character, and we never get that, unfortunately. Well, that's all I have to show for now. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Goodbye.